Everyone, good evening, and welcome to the Utah Museum of Fine Arts. I'm Gretchen Dietrich, the Executive Director of the museum, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the Dumpke Auditorium in the Marcia and John Price Museum building for tonight's very special in-person program. So thanks for joining us. Before we begin this evening's program, I would like to acknowledge that the UMFA is situated on land which is named for the Ute tribe and is the unceded, traditional, and ancestral homeland of the Shoshone, Paiute, Goshute, and Ute tribes. The University of Utah and the UMFA acknowledge the significance of place and the continued existence and contributions of Indigenous people who have lived on and cared for this land for thousands of years. We respect the sovereign relationships between tribes, states, and the federal government, and we affirm our commitment to a partnership with Native nations and urban Indian communities through research, education, and community outreach. The UMFA, as many of you know, is committed to collecting and exhibiting artworks by artists whose voices and practices have been often underrepresented throughout the history of art. It's with intention that the AIR exhibition features such a diverse group of artists and presents a variety of different perspectives and ideas about AIR. AIR is an important element that we all share, something that exists around us and between us, something that connects us. We are so honored that Will Wilson's work is such an important part of this exhibition, and so delighted to have him here with us this evening. And I'll just say as an aside, we are all pretty geeked out about Will. He's amazing. And I was away when the installation of the exhibition was actually happening, and pretty much every staff member is in love with this man. So whatever went down in there, you charmed everyone. This, sponsored by the sponsored by the Andy Warhol Foundation for Visual Arts and the ESSR Impact Endowment Fund, AIR aims to make the invisible visible through contemporary art that explores the topic from environmental, social justice, and cultural perspectives. We would like to thank our AIR Lab partner, the amazing humans at Red Butte Garden at the University of Utah, for generously providing the plants and expertise necessary to realize this iteration of Will Wilson's AIR Lab. We're also very grateful to Salt Lake County Zoo Arts and Parks Program and Utah Division of Heritage and Arts, National Endowment for the Arts, for their support of tonight's event. Truly, ZAP makes great things happen in our county and at this museum. The AIR exhibition was curated by the amazing Whitney Tassi, UMFA's former senior curator and curator of modern and contemporary art. And she's been working on the show for the last 9 years and was a member of our staff for about 9.5 years. So we're excited that she can be here with us this evening. We are super proud of the AIR exhibition, and we hope that exhibitions like AIR will inspire new ideas and understandings, just as we're sure tonight's presentation will. So thank you for being with us tonight. Please be sure to silence your cell phone, and please join me in welcoming Whitney Tassi.
Hi. Thanks for having me back. Thank you, Gretchen, for such a warm welcome and for all the amazing work you do here. I'm really happy to be here today and grateful that I can introduce to you Will Wilson. First, I want to extend my sincere gratitude to the UMFA staff, the exhibition sponsors that Gretchen mentioned, the U of U campus community, the museum members and visitors, and the artists in the exhibition. So much work and generous sharing from so many people came together to make the AIR exhibition a reflection of our community's hopes and needs. I am particularly grateful to Red Butte Gardens for their ongoing support of Will Wilson's AIR Lab installation. Thank you all. And to Will, thank you for your commitment to your work and for bringing your knowledge and research to our community. I have learned so much from you and am wholly inspired by your commitment to leave this place, this world that we share, better than you found it. Thank you. So, who is Will Wilson? Will Wilson is a Diné photographer who uses historical and cutting-edge photographic processes to survey environmental injustices, to expose the politics of photographic representation, and to assert the survivance of his people. He spent his formative years living on the Navajo Nation and studied photography, sculpture, and art history at the University of New Mexico, where he earned an MFA, and at Oberlin College, where he earned a BA. In 2007, Wilson won the Native American Fine Art Fellowship from the Eiteljorg Museum. In 2010, the Joan Mitchell Foundation Award for Sculpture. In 2016, the Pollock Krasner Foundation Grant for Photography. In 2017, New Mexico's Governor Award for Excellence in the Arts. And in 2020, the Dorian Artist Residency at the Yale University Art Gallery. Wilson has held visiting professorships at the Institute of American Indian Arts, Oberlin College, and the University of Arizona. He is currently program head of photography at Santa Fe Community College. Will Wilson's work is exhibited and collected internationally, and the UMFA is honored to hold his photographs in its collection. Currently, his mid-career retrospective is on view at the Southeastern Center for Contemporary Art in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and his exhibition, In Conversation, which juxtaposes his tintype portraits with those of the 19th century photographer Edward Curtis, is currently traveling to museums across the US. Later this month, Speaking with Light, Contemporary Indigenous Photography, opens at the Ammon Carter Museum in Fort Worth, Texas. Wilson co-curated this exhibition with John Rohrbach to highlight the ways that Indigenous artists have used photography over the past 3 decades to reclaim representation and affirm their existence, perspectives, and trauma. Yes, there will be a catalog, don't miss it. And now, as Gretchen mentioned, I invite you to silence your cell phones, and I ask you to hold your questions until the end of the lecture. Please join me in welcoming Will Wilson.
Thank you so much, and thanks to the UMFA and for all the folks who helped me install the work and just be part of this amazing exhibition. It's an honor to be here today. Thank you so much for coming out. Am I supposed to turn on the slides from here, or do you guys do that? Sorry. Maybe I'll try. Do my podium.
Here we go.
Okay. I think so. Well, there's nothing projected. Oh, there it is. Okay.
I think the cable is just a little.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
Just make sure you go to.
Oh, that's the middle. Okay. Okay. All right.
All right.
Yay. Thank you. All right. I'd like to kind of introduce myself and my practice just with this image, because it every time I see it, it's kind of a testament to this crazy amount of change that we've all experienced in such a short amount of time. And it also, it says a lot about kind of the narrative power of photography and how it can be used in different ways. You're looking at a picture of a family on their way from summer sheep camp to Tuba City Trading Post in Tuba City, Arizona. And the young girl in the foreground is my mom. And whenever I look at this image, I just think of, the way that I move around the world today and, that we all move around the world today, and just how much transformation has occurred in such a short amount of time. My mom passed away last year, and she was 74 years old. So I imagine this was shot sometime in the mid-50s. but it's just remarkable to me. Just something about the photograph. My mom would often recount the kind of negotiation that went on around the making of this image, right? Ray Manley was an editorial photographer based in Tucson, Arizona, and he was up on the Navajo Nation, and he ran across my family, my mom and her sisters, and they wouldn't have sourced water from the side of the road. They were well provisioned and, I think relatively a wealthy family by Diné standards. But this was the image that Ray Manley had in his mind that he wanted to kind of create and generate. And so this is that image. So I'll just talk a little bit about my practice and how I've arrived at some of the different projects that I'm currently kind of undertaking. I grew up between both the Navajo Nation, Tuba City, Arizona, went to Tuba City boarding school for 5 years, and San Francisco, California. So my mom was Navajo, Kia Ani Ishle. Irish and Welsh, Bashashin. So my mom was Navajo, my dad was Irish and Welsh, lived in San Francisco, and I kind of moved back and forth between these two spaces. When I found photography in high school, I immediately fell in love with it because it became, I think, just a vital way for me to share my kind of creative insights, because I'm not a fluent Navajo speaker, and when I was at home with my family, Navajo was the primary language, and so in some ways I was sort of mute, and I kind of lived in translation, I think, constantly, right? And so later, I started kind of thinking about and questioning my own practice in relation to photography, thinking a little bit more critically about how indigenous people have been photographed and represented historically. And so I wanted to kind of intervene or trouble that relationship. And one of the ways that I started doing that early on was to create these kind of installation forms and structures. So as Whitney mentioned, I went to the University of New Mexico where I got my MFA, and this is the MFA show that kind of resulted at the end of my studies there. I also went there because they had a really strong program in the history of photography, and that's also been something that's kind of important to my practice. But I thought about these spaces as kind of transforming the way that, the viewer would receive the work. You kind of have a different relationship to the images, when you're immersed in a space or an architecture. So a little bit of a fast forward. I began this kind of ongoing series, actually in 2004. It's called Autoimmune Response, and I'm kind of performing this role of a Diné man trying to figure out where everybody's gone. So, I'm imagining this kind of post-apocalyptic perspective and performing that in this space. It's a little bit maybe hidden, but there's a nuclear explosion, so early Photoshop, Nevada test site. And the series follows the travails of this protagonist as he roams the landscape, trying to figure out why the world has become toxic to him and how to survive in it, right? So the notion of autoimmune response, it refers to autoimmune diseases. Indigenous populations are kind of seen as sort of vector populations in terms of their relationship to these diseases, right? We're the canaries in the coal mine, so to speak. These diseases are often associated with sudden changes in climate, foodways, environment, economies. And so I'm thinking about, this disease that we're find ourselves kind of in, but it's also about a response, right? So it's about how do you move forward? How do you kind of claim agency in that situation? And survive. So the protagonist finds a hogan, right, a customary indigenous architectural form, and it becomes a laboratory of sorts. And so I got to use our winter sheep camp and a hogan that my grandfather built many years ago as a kind of stage to set some of this drama. Something else I think that I was thinking about when I was thinking about kind of producing this series is, the environmental toxins that we've lived with historically, and certainly uranium extraction and processing has been a huge issue for Diné people and the nation in general. But I was also referencing kind of I think maybe indigenous worldviews and thinking about the creation story. In that story, there are these hero twins who rid the world of monsters and make the world habitable for us in this present world, right? So you often see these figures repeated in the context of this series. And then in this story, in order to live in the post-apocalyptic world, you have to have habitation. And so he designs a home kind of his own making based on the hogan. And that's kind of the first iteration of the installation, right? So I was invited by a curator named Joe Baker at the Heard Museum in Arizona to produce this and built the hogan. And then, it was installed with these large-scale photographs. So this is a little bit of kind of research that I was doing around the idea and the project, weaving this bed form that the protagonist is kind of drawing energy from. Weaving will appear later. An important customary practice in Diné culture. So this is the first iteration of the Air Lab, which is the structure that's in the exhibition. And this was in Tucson, Arizona. So, when I got back the hogan, I to put it into good use in my backyard. And I was collaborating with an organization called Native Seed Search in Tucson, Arizona, and they're kind of a seed bank for heirloom variety food species in the Southwest in particular. So they gave me a bunch of seed. I mean, they have a great program. If you tell them you're indigenous and from that region, they'll give you free seed, to an extent, so you can kind of grow those amazing plants that are so well designed for these spaces. So in the iteration upstairs, Red Butte Nursery, which was mentioned, they did an amazing job of cultivating and providing plants that actually serve as phytoremediators. So the plants upstairs are able to draw heavy metals out of the grounds, right, and the earth. And they, we would imagine do fairly well in this region. So kind of thinking through that response idea again. This sculpture has kind of had different lives and different forms. I got to do it at the Denver Botanical Garden, which was really amazing because they actually propagated the seed for me and gave this kind of space for me to expand the series. I got to bring in my studio lighting and kind of do the performance in that space and create these other images. A little bit of a shift. I talked a little bit about kind of, being interested in the history of photography. History of process in particular, I think, is something that this work kind of starts to bring into the broader narrative of the autoimmune response project. But our protagonist is now, kind of traveling through time, through photographic processes. This is a combination of tintype and digital shot together, but kind of that inference of history through the historic photographic process. a process that was used when, the American Southwest became that after the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1848, I think. But soon after that, there were surveys sent out, right, to kind of image this new resource that had just become part of the United States portfolio, I suppose. So more, this is my mom and my daughter now. I'm bringing other characters into this narrative and revisiting some of the sites. So one project kind of bleeds into another in my practice. And something that, became more and more apparent was kind of looking at like the history of extraction and processing on the Navajo Nation. The United Nuclear Corporation Church Rock uranium mill spill that happened shortly after 3 Mile Island is actually America's worst nuclear accident by the numbers of really knows that much about it, or it's not very well publicized. And it's something that, pretty much every Diné family has some like direct relationship with. They've had somebody who's worked in the industry, health concerns associated with that. And so I've started to do this project called Connecting the Dots. That's a photographic survey of uranium extraction and processing on the Navajo Nation, particularly focusing on uranium. This is not my image. This is an image by Joel Sternfeld from his project American Prospects. But it takes a picture of a site that I used to play in when I was a kid that's outside of Tuba City, Arizona, and it's called the Rare Metals Uranium Processing Mill, and now it's a super fun site. So that site, I'm so like happy that he took that picture because, that site doesn't exist anymore in that way, but in my memory it does. And then also, now it's this remediated space. And so I can kind of share the before and after image, right? So this is that same site, but now shot with a drone outside of Tuba. And, since it's a site, it's actually, had some serious remediation kind of taken, applied to it. So, the worker housing that used to be along the road there. That's the road between Tuba City and Kayenta. Something else that's of kind of a big concern with these is groundwater contamination. There was the mill, there were, years of tailings piles there. And this is all just kind of upgrade from the Mon, which is a really important kind of alluvial flow that goes to Monkopi, which is a Hopi village just on the horizon, and then past that, the Curly Valley, where my grandfather actually had his fields. So it's something that I, ponder often, and that, is being monitored, and there's serious concern about kind of the leaching or the vector flow of that contamination. So the dots map that identifies I think from the 1940s, the Navajo Nation produced over half of the U.S.'s commercial supply of uranium, and then it was, it continued to be mined commercially into the 80s. Interesting fact, until 1971, the Atomic Energy Commission was the sole purchaser of uranium in the United States. And despite the well kind of documented hazards of working with this material, the Navajo workers were not warned of this risk, right? So a couple generations of people worked in these spaces. This is an upgrade facility, again, next to a kind of an important water site source, the Little Colorado River watershed. This is another image from higher up looking down. Another thing is, livestock. These depressions in the landscape fill with water when the water does come. And it's a potential vector for contamination. The drone really enables, a different kind of view or vision of this landscape that's really hard to kind of understand if you're on the ground, right? So if you're on the ground, you don't understand that this is just over the hill from Monument Valley, this iconic Western kind of, landscape. But there was a mill here. The Monument Valley region hosted mines, all over this region. So when they decided to do remediation and set up the Mexican hat disposal cell, they brought a lot of that material to the side of this mill. The images, there's a triptych of the Mexican hat disposal cell in the exhibition. And this is just me getting closer to the site. Something that's interesting, and I'll just take a couple steps back, but in the middle of this, I think it's 14 acres. That makes more sense to me, kind of site of remediation. There is this strange monument to the production of this remediation, right? And so there's the little shadow of my drone. I didn't walk out there to take this picture, but I was able to send the drone out, and there's this plaque, and it says that there's 4,400,000 tons of radioactive tailings kind of interred there. Another site of a former uranium processing mill right next to another important water source, right? So that's the Shiprock, the iconic Shiprock, and this is Shiprock, New Mexico. Currently, the Navajo Nation Fair is happening right on the other side of the disposal cell. And then this is the last remaining kind of traditional uranium processing mill in the United States at White Mesa, which is just south of Blanding and a little bit north of Bluff. And it's 2 miles upgrade from the Ute Mountain Indian Reservation. And there's, serious concern about groundwater contamination coming from this site as well. I often have my truck in there somewhere just for scale. And that's kind of speaking back to this idea of the intersection, right? Between this fantastic vision that's kind of brought me to these places, and then the documentary work that I'm currently doing. Oops. Am I going the wrong way? No, all right. Sorry about that. And then again, that kind of blending of historic media and process, I think, to kind of infer some of that history as well. So I should say that, I'm doing this work, this research, and I've been generously supported by a couple organizations. One is called the Indian Collective. I was the recipient of one of their Radical Imagination grants this year. And also an organization called the Native Arts and Culture Foundation. So if you're interested to hear some other voices who are kind of looking at these issues from kind of different perspectives, I'm working with Diné College, which is the tribal college on the Navajo Nation. And right now we're doing a speaker series. So Valerie Rangel, she was the poet laureate of Santa Fe, and she's written this kind of primer on environmental justice and injustice in New Mexico. Chip Thomas amazing photographer. He's also a photographer who's worked for the Indian Health Service for the last 35 years. And he talks about his practice and also about public health in relation to these issues. And the series has actually grown since then. So I invite you to check it out. A little bit of a shift here. I think as a photographer, I'm always thinking about different kind of strategies of public address. Public art is certainly one of those. This is a project that I did with my friend Josh Sarantitis. It was a Arizona Department of Transportation Public Works funded initiative, and we made a photograph out of glass that's 360 feet long and about 20 feet high, and our pixel was a 3/4 inch square of glass. And so giant photo mosaic, right, using Venetian glass tile to kind of like honor and commemorate the history of this community called Barrio Anita in Tucson, Arizona. There's my collaborator, Josh. So we designed it kind of in community for the first year, produced it for another year, and then took half a year to install it. It's called the Barrio Anita Mural Project. And everybody in the image has some like deep connection to the neighborhood, to the barrio. Mr. Valenzuela was the local mariachi teacher, and we commissioned him to write a corrido, and he came out with the Aguilitas during the opening ceremonies and performed. This is a reference to La Llorona. This was actually produced on the side of I-10 down there in Arizona. It's sort of a sound barrier wall that's kind of shielding the community from, sorry about that, from the interstate there. But it also kind of blocks them from the Santa Cruz River, which historically was, an important kind of community space for the neighborhood. After we did that project, we moved on to kind of produce a little studio. And so this is, a little bit about public art and the studio that we had for a number of years there in Tucson. This is a project that we did at the Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport. And then this is one in Philadelphia, where they have an amazing mural arts program. Again, kind of the idea of one practice bleeding into the next, using software that we designed in order to kind of map pixels that enabled us to create that 4,000 square foot mural. I used that and then downsized the unit. I've always wanted to weave a Diné textile, and so I was able to kind of do that in collaboration with a crew of folks, and we produced a glass tile rug with QR codes because we wanted to kind of have it be a storytelling device as well. And so when you scan the rug, you're taken to a short video, and hopefully I can share this. Oops. Let's see. This is about 2.5 minutes long.
Could you Nadish Altonson? Could you Nadish Atlaya? Could you Nadish Alton? Did I pay it a Janson? Hasn't Snazzy or Snazzy? Stacy, I'm letting you have it to a PD that you all have on the door. Of course, like you. Did you know you couldn't laugh? Chocoto, did you just know chocolate? What did you do? This toy? Did you honor King Law? What honor King Law did you do your this chill? But could be that you could not King Law, which not King Law. Now the children are named Toad out or not named this talk. This chili evening. Oh, bên này chế này kêu ta đến thì bên thọ này đó nó nhiều chuyện nó thì nó có sinh sống đây đi nào cũng ai đi cái nào nó
So that piece, that was my mom and an auntie of mine, and they were speaking about a process that yields a two-sided rug, right? So it's a different pattern on either side, right? Which is kind of, I don't know, it's not a lost art, but less and less people know how to kind of do that weave these days. And that was a collaborative project. So you saw images of Joy Farley, her sister, Pamela Brown, who both are weavers, our good friend Jamie Smith, who's kind of a community organizer and arts activist, and then the one person you didn't see is Dylan McLaughlin, who's this amazing young Diné filmmaker who put that piece together for us. So, you know, I think collaboration is something else I often found myself doing just because there's lots of stuff that I don't know, but I'm very curious about, and I want to like learn kind of collaboratively with other folks. You know, after that, I was inspired to make another series of textiles. Each one of these refers to one of the four sacred mountains of the Diné. And when you scan the codes, you're taken to a video, and maybe just for interest, for time's sake, I won't show this one. But you know, it's that same protagonist from the Autoimmune Response Project, kind of, you know, checking out and kind of surveying each of these realms. So this is a different project, but another ongoing project. I seem to kind of get involved in these longer term projects. And Whitney made reference to our Crystal Bridges kind of exhibition that's going around called In Conversation. And that's based on this process, which is a historic photographic process called wet plate. This project is called the Critical Indigenous Photographic Exchange, or CIPEX for short. And sort of the tagline for it is, what if Indians invented photography? You know, would there be a different set of kind of ideas, protocols, maybe notions of like reciprocity built into the exchange that is, you know, making a portrait? This is Joe Horse Capture Jr., for example. I didn't know Joe. I knew of his work as a curator, but he saw my iPad there and he brought up this image of Horse Capture, who was his great-great-great-grandfather, who was photographed by Edward Curtis in the early 20th century. You know, and Joe just kind of encapsulated my project really, really neatly in one image there. So this is an ongoing project that whenever I get an opportunity to do it, I'm really excited. I'll set up a portrait studio and, work with a sitter for about, half an hour to create, hopefully, a nice rendition of them. And in that process, I'll gift the tintype. They're usually 8x10 tintypes to the sitter in exchange for a scan of it. So I've made at least a couple thousand portraits now over the last 10 years, and sort of dispersed this archive amongst all the sitters. I mean, I have the digital versions of it, in my very unorganized archive, digital archive. It's I think an exciting and sort of vital engagement with portraiture. And one of the things that I'm trying to explore, I think, is the notion of agency and photography and portraiture. And I imagined, or have always wondered, like, especially with those Curtis images, what those people were saying, because that was a trying time for a lot of those folks. And so I collaborated with an app designer, and we developed an app called Talking Tintypes. So if you download this app, it's a free app that's available on the Play Store or the app. It looks like this. With a certain selection of these portraits, you can actually have them come to life on your device, right? So, So Madrine Salgado came to like an iteration of the SIPICS project at the Seattle Art Museum. And, she's an attorney and she's the public relations manager for the Muckleshoot Nation, but she's also a jingle dress dancer. And she wanted to kind of represent herself that way and perform for us. So we have built a series of these talking tintypes. Carla plays a beautiful little Bach minuet. If you download the image and you go up and spend some time in the Air lab, there's an image of Melissa Poachema, who's Hopi, and she redoes Princess Leia's speech to Obi-Wan Kenobi, except she does it to Popeye, who led the Pueblo Revolt in 1680. So I invite you guys to download the app and check it out. This is another version of a talking tintype collaboration. So Adam McKinney is a friend and a collaborator who I knew in Santa Fe, New Mexico, but when he got a job at Texas Christian University in Fort Worth, Texas, he did some research about kind of race relations in that city. And he found the story of this man, Fred Rouse, who is a meat packer who crossed a picket line and was murdered. And so Adam, whose work is very much about kind of performance and embodying kind of trauma and thinking about art as a way to kind of work through that trauma and heal, invited me to collaborate on this process or this project. And so these are all talking tintypes, and they're meant to honor Fred Rouse, who was the man who was murdered. Adam is standing in front of one of the last major kind of infrastructural kind of sites produced by the KKK. In 1921, when Mr. Rouse was murdered, the KKK had, one of its largest kind of memberships in Fort Worth, and that building is that site. So Adam did a extensive research about the history of this story and this man, Mr. Rouse worked at the Armor Swift meatpacking company, which is, still has a big presence in Fort Worth today. And Fred Rouse crossed a picket line. He wasn't invited to be part of the union because he was black. He was attacked. He tried to defend himself, and he was beat within an inch of his life by the crowd. When the cops were taking him to the morgue, he kind of moved, and they realized he wasn't dead. And so they took him to the segregated hospital, which is this building. And 3 days later, a mob came and kidnapped him, and they murdered him at this site, at a place. There's no longer a tree here, but it was called the Death Tree. And so, at each one of these sites, Adam and I and a crew of his students set up our tintype darkroom and shot video coordinated around his choreography in each of these spaces. And so I showed you an example of that, but I've got one of the dances that I'll show you in a minute. And this is the site of Mr. Rouse's burial. So if you have the app and you have any of these images, you can make them come to life and witness Adam's. So I should say, and I'll just scroll back a little bit here. So Mr. Rouse was murdered on December 21st, 1921. Last year, 100 years to the day, they broke ground on the Fred Rouse Memorial Park. So the city of Fort Worth has recognized this, and Adam, along with a coalition of citizens in Fort Worth, had created the Tarrant County Coalition for Peace and Justice, and is working with the Peace and Justice Initiative, which built the big national memorial in Montgomery, Alabama. And so it's now going to be a city park honoring the memory of Mr. Fred Rouse. And then just a couple months ago, they were able to purchase this building, and they're going to transform it into a museum for kind of truth and reconciliation and healing through the arts. So, while I haven't been involved in all of that organizing and activism and this amazing amount of work, like, Adam does talk about this series as being kind of like the inspiration for a lot of that other work, so I don't know, I like to think about it as, you know, a real testament to kind of the power of creativity and collaboration and art to come together to kind of inspire a community to create like really awesome change. So I'll just say a little bit about a different kind of side of my practice, and that's this curatorial bent. You know, I think representation is something that I've always, you know, thought a lot about and kind of like struggled to promote. And, you know, usually that's how it works. If you're not represented, then you've got to figure out how to open those spaces and, you know, continue the work in collaboration with a lot of other people who are doing that kind of stuff, right? And so I had the honor of working on this curatorial kind of and I guess representational effort around contemporary indigenous art writ large. This is a project called Manifestations that profiles the work of 60 indigenous artists. And then most recently, I have co-curated this exhibition, which is contemporary indigenous photography, and it's not going to the Museum of Fine Art Boston. Sorry, I didn't correct that. But it is going to go to the Denver Art Museum, and that's going to be opening in October. And you know, it's been an amazing kind of opportunity to share the work of some really phenomenal photographers and artists and people who I've kind of thought about as heroes and inspirations. So yeah, I even have like our catalog that just got published to share. So, you know, look for that. There's going to be that forthcoming exhibition kind of going around. But yeah, and this is like future potential collaborative thinkings and projects. One thing that I started to think about a lot when I was media movement. The abandoned is very close to Red and Creek. Is James. It butts the Navajo Nation, actually. So I was on the Navajo Nation side of the fence, so to speak, when I shot that image. Is of that but yeah, there just seems to be this with so much for you know, taking the time to listen about what I've been doing. And so thank you.
Questions? I'm gonna raise your hand. I'll bring you a mic. Anybody has a question?
I may not even need a mic, guys. But of course, we went through the display before the speech, and outstanding by all means. But you presented the plants that are the organic answer, it looks like, to part of the problem. Has this been applied in a larger effort?
I know that there have been some instances of phytoremediation. I'm by no means an expert, and you know, I think that's part of, you know, I don't know, as an artist, I get to like dream some of these potential solutions and then learn about them and then promote them and potentially do more research, learn about them. I know at Chernobyl, they planted the sunflowers, and they use the sunflowers are one of those species that draw heavy metal, and they use that as a kind of natural kind of healing process, on the land there. Yeah, it's amazing to me too.
Hi, thank you for talking to us. Amazing presentation. When I was upstairs or wherever it is in the Hogan, and I was reading the piece of paper there that talked about, this project, it said that you had to do a lot of research to find where the abandoned mines were. I guess my question is, from the EPA, I'm curious, do you know how transparent the EPA has been with the Navajo Nation and how, involved and cooperative they've been in cleaning up these sites?
I think they've been fairly cooperative in terms of getting the information out and working with the Navajo Nation EPA to identify them. And there are these things for at least 520 of the sites called site screening reports. And they actually had somebody sort of walk the line, so to speak. So they had a Geiger counter and they had like a GPS tracker, and you can see where they're walking through like pretty hot spots, like where you wouldn't want to spend very much time. And then other areas where, it's the same as background radiation. It's interesting because one of the things that we're trying to do in the project is to make that data easily accessible to people who might want to know about, where the abandoned uranium mines are near where they live. So even though it is public information, and I think a lot of work went into kind of producing it, it's not well known, and it's hard to find. If when you're out there on the land, sometimes the cell phone signal's not so great, and then you've got to go through 4 or 5 screens to find the PDF to download it to decide if you're near one of these things. So, yeah, we're trying to make a big Google sheet right now that'll be publicly available that people can just go and click on, and then eventually that might be the foundation for an app. So you'd be out there and you could be like, oh, okay, those are the ones near me. So, on that side, the information is there. It just needs to be organized better, I guess, and provided to the community better. The cleanup, I think there's been a lot of planning and there has been some big remediation, but the vast majority of the places are not remediated, and people are still getting exposed. And it doesn't have to be that way,
Just when I look at the picture you have up there, how do you handle the problem of scale in these sorts of photographs where the left and the right I can sort of figure out, but if I looked at the one in the middle, I'd have no idea whether that was super tiny, super large.
Uh-huh.
It's kind of cool.
Yeah, you're talking exactly about what this triptych is inferring, this notion of scale or problem of scale, or maybe, the fact that you can't really understand these when you're on the ground, in front of them, and it's only through the use of this relatively new technology, commercial technology, these kind of surveillance things that can fly in the air, these amazing robots with cameras on them. But yeah, my solution has been aerial photography, and this new world that has been opened up to photographers, My students started coming into my classrooms with these pictures, and I was like, how did you get that? Were you in a helicopter? You can't afford a helicopter. And then one of my students really got me. He showed me this footage. He was in the Marin Headlands, like across the way from the Golden Gate Bridge, flew his drone through the Golden Gate Bridge towers. It's totally illegal, right? I was just like, oh my God, like I have to learn how to do that. But yeah, I mean, drones have unlocked like a new tool. It's pretty amazing for imaging stuff like this, you know.
We have a question back here.
So in looking at your work with everything from tintypes to drones and app store apps, it's fascinating how you like span so much time and so many different processes. And I was curious how you decide when you're working on a project to use very modern technology or very historic technology. How do you decide like which process to match with what work?
I mean, mostly it's kind of pragmatic. Well, like in the case of this, sure, it's been pragmatic because there's no way you can understand the enormity of that remediated site. I mean, it's amazing to be there, but it's like impossible to take a good picture of it. Or I shouldn't say it's impossible. It's hard for me to take a good picture of it from the ground. But like with a drone, you know, all of a sudden I'm like, okay, it's a pretty remarkable image. I don't know. That's a good question. I think part of being a photographer and a teacher of photography and someone who's interested in its history is somebody who's, you know, I'm very much interested in imaging technologies and storytelling. And so I guess kind of having a bit of a historic perspective on that, like, helps me make those decisions. I don't know if I have an easy answer for that. But part of it is also just being like imagining, you know, like what if that person could talk? That would be super cool, you know. Or how would it, you know, kind of disrupt people's kind of notion that Native Americans only exist in the past if all of a sudden that person came to life on their phone, you know. So I do think about like troubling, like kind of set ways of thinking about photography. And maybe I'm always thinking about how I can like disrupt people's kind of normal viewing habits or something. But
From the audience, how long ago was your first photo of a mine, and do you remember what photo it was?
of a mine in particular?
I guess how long have you been doing the pictures?
This project in particular is relatively recent. I've only like fully kind of devoted a lot of time to this since 2019, since like right before the pandemic. And this site, you know, I knew of its existence. I'd seen other people's photographs of it, and so I went to visit it, you know, and I spent time with it. I photographed it from the ground for a long time, and I was like, wow, I want to figure out how to investigate this and study it more. The idea of like the issue of like uranium contamination on the land has been something I've been aware of from a very like young age. Like when I was in 7th grade, I did a speech for the Navajo Western Agency like speech competition about nuclear non-proliferation. So it's been something that's like in the kind of cultural, I guess, like zeitgeist, at least out there for a long time. Like people have been thinking about these things for a long time.
Do you think that seeing the Ray Manley image of your mother and her experience with that and was part of the inspiration for you to start capturing authentic Native life, like seeing that that
Yeah, sort
his
of. I
image.
mean, I found that picture because she told me to go find it. And I tracked down Ray Manley, and he had a studio, and his children, still were running the studio. But when my mom told me, about the story, I had already started photography,
Okay.
and I was almost already kind of thinking about a lot of this stuff. But yeah, it certainly reinforced it. And it was exciting, I think, for my mom, because I think she was thinking about it in that context too. Oh, like, I want to show you this, this is going to kind of your wheels turning because I had this crazy experience and I know that this image exists out there. And I mean, more for me, it's just like fascinating to see like that's how they got around, They
Yeah.
couldn't call
Yeah,
Uber
the
to
second
get
part
them
was
to
going to be
the-
like, I wonder if that was healing for her to like kind of see you doing the other end of it.
Yeah, I think
for-
so.
yeah.
I think so.
And I'm sorry about her passing for you. So thank you.
Great. We might have time for one more if anybody has a burning question. But if not, thank you, Will.
Just leave that up there.